Rising.
Yay! Oh, we start off every episode. Yay! Yay! All right. Well, today we have a very special guest and one of our core team members here in Taos, Ginger, and we're so excited to have you and hear your insights. You sure have helped me a lot, Ginger, and I think you have a lot to offer for the planet and humanity. And then we have Mathew Ryan as well.
Yay!
Myself, Zane. So you were talking a minute ago, Ginger, about this idea of sort of being on the high dive, on the edge of the diving board and getting ready to jump in. And there's so much change happening in all of our lives right now. And it's transformative in so many ways. And I think you speak really beautifully about it. I know you've encouraged me at many points to just go for it. And that can be a really tough and intimidating moment because so much of our programming has been designed to limit us and to keep us in this sort of enslavement mentality where we don't want to shine too bright and we don't really want to show our face to the public. And we don't want to be ridiculed for speaking our truth, you know. So I was wondering if you would be willing to jump in with what you were just explaining to us a few minutes ago.
Well, within the context of this moment that everyone's facing individually and collectively, it reminds me of, so you're a kid and someone's going off the high diving board and you're like, I really want to do that. So you screw up your courage at one point, just climbing the ladder up to the top of the high diving board. And now you're at the end of the high diving board and reality sets in and you're like, well, do I dive? Do I try and be graceful about this? Or do I literally just jump and at least get in the water? That's kind of where I see many people at. And of course there's fear. Of course there's the unknown. Am I gonna go to the bottom of the pool or the lake and crash or whatever? But you know you have to do it, so you jump. And that's the moment I feel like so many of us are at. And again, the collective is at. We're facing something brand new. I've always been the type of person that kind of makes it up as I go along. And I feel that many people are going to have to get more comfortable with that. That to me is the moment where true creativity happens.
Scary.
Watch out.
Yeah. And Mathew, I know that obviously at some point in your life, you made that leap. You've been doing healing work for how long now?
It has been 12 and a half years full time.
Damn. So maybe, I don't know if you'd like to add on that concept, but.
I really resonate with this concept, and I agree with you, Ginger, that it's this is an energy. It's like maybe a field of consciousness or something that is really moving through. As you said, like this distortion, matrix of, keeping us locked into the programming. And it's like we're facing these moments where we have guidance and inspiration that's rising from within ourselves. And yet we have to, reconcile that with the way that the existing control matrix has directed us. And so, in my personal experience, I definitely can relate to that, where my ex-wife and I, we had taken over a very successful gallery and furniture store inside of our community here in Taos. And it kind of coincided as we were, changing directions. It coincided with the collapse of the economy in 2008. And so as the material matrix of the situation of the economy was collapsing, and we saw our revenue like just plummet through the floor, basically over the next couple of years, I was kind of forced into a situation of like, this is no longer tenable. I realized after closing the gallery, I had one foot in a nervous breakdown and I didn't realize it. Like I was really, my nervous system was completely shot from the stress, and all these old patterns, coming up around, money and prosperity, and finally reached that point where when we made the decision to close, I was left, for a few months, really just recovering my energy. And luckily my ex-wife, she had a managerial position at a really successful restaurant. And so we were okay, but I reached that place of going, okay, well, now what? Now what do I do? I've been running my own business now for a few years. I don't think I can go become an employee like that. I just knew within myself that was going to be a soul crushing experience.
I was literally hearing soul crushing as you're saying.
So, yep, there's the truth and the confirmation. Wow. And so, and I'd been interested in doing the healing work and had been kind of practicing via the gallery where, Lane put a sign outside the gallery underneath the FAFA sign, and it said crystals/readings. And so these tourists that were always coming in, we were in a prominent location in the middle of town, and tourists were always coming in going, I want a crystal reading. What's a crystal reading? And it was crystals/readings because we were selling crystals. But that in that moment, of looking into this unknown and what's the future direction. And, I was supported by my partner in being able to take that leap, to dive into the unknown of how do I do this? How am I going to arrange all of this? And the only thing that really mattered was the decision of making the decision that this is now the new recalibration. This is the new direction, and everything necessary from the clients to the healing center, like all of these things ended up then kind of magnetizing in. And but it really was that decision to kind of jump off into the unknown. But because it was in alignment with my spirit, it eventually brought in all of the circumstances necessary to support me. And then eventually when Lane and I, when we ended our marriage, that was again another kind of jumping off point, because I couldn't rely upon that other source of income. And so there was more of an urgency, and yet the same thing of surrendering into your divine purpose, even if it doesn't, it looks scary. It, at least in my experience, everything magnetized in, and I've been able to support myself in this work ever since then. And, but it takes a lot, there's a lot of fear that will come up and old programming. So yeah, I think that this is something that so many people right now are facing. And it comes up all the time in sessions with people where they see and they know deep within themselves that there is a new direction. They just maybe don't know how to identify that direction quite yet. It's not formed yet. And that's where we always begin this process is, putting yourself into vibrational alignment with the future timeline that you feel like you're being called into manifesting. And I think that the circumstances then arrange themselves accordingly.
Yeah. So beautifully stated. Matthew Ryan. And when you speak about that, it's, that was 12 years ago, whatever for you. I'm in the middle of that process right now. So it's so relevant. Yeah. And when I watch myself, and again, Ginger, thank you, but you've helped me so much. But I watch myself oscillate between these moments of I am so lit up. I have so much to offer for the planet. I am so excited for all the people I'm going to help and work with, and all the, co-creative magic we're going to bring in here. And I want it to be everywhere, and I want to be doing all of it right at once, right? And then a few days later, I'm like, oh, like, that was hard getting out of bed. I'm like, and now I have to put the dishes away. Like, oh boy, I don't know. This is looking tough. And I mean, it's funny, but that's real. Like that's been my real day-to-day existence, and massive oscillations between different kind of frequency bands. And something that we had discussed, just a minute ago was how it almost feels like right now we're moving through these different layers of timelines on the planet, and then individually through different lifelines. And there's kind of this oscillation, this like wow, 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 where we'll at 1 minute it'll feel so close, like the entire New Earth structure, everything is there, ready, already prepared on the light grid, ready to go and ready to just manifest, right? Yeah. Into our physical world. And then the next day you're like, that just seems impossibly far away. And, maybe you have an experience like Justine and I going to Denver and being like, wow, this is really different from my day. Not to riff on Denver. If you're from Denver and you're doing great work there,
it's
that's
a great
awesome.
City.
Yeah.
It's a great city, but it's a city.
But yeah. Or like, or going to like Espanola to go to the Lowe's, the hardware store, and you're like, wow, like the apocalypse kind of hit here, and like maybe like on one sense it's like, oh, we're not on the apocalyptic timeline anymore. We're on this beautiful New Earth creation frequency. And then you pop down there and you're like, oh, well, maybe some people are, And I think what's happening right now is really interesting because the pressure is ramping up. It's clamping down. There's this constriction through the system, through, inflation. I think most of it's coming through financial manipulation, but it's also then happening holographically through all of the energetics and the frequency modulation, the matrix overlays, all the things that they're pumping onto the planet are turned up to max. And so is the solar activity. So are the new light codes that are dropping onto the planet. And so it's like we're in this pressure cooker right now of so much information from so many different angles coming down and informing our fields, and we see lifelines opening and closing in real time all day long, every day, right? And so it takes a degree of mastery just to hold your center and keep level moving through this time period. But I had a conversation with my dad yesterday at lunch, and he was explaining kind of what he's going through. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, that, makes all of us, everyone I know, basically struggling with the same thing. So don't beat yourself up. From my perspective, you're doing an amazing job, and I think that we've talked about this, Matthew, from a different perspective, a different level, we are being cheered on like you cannot believe, just for being here and for holding on and for riding this crazy wave and, still being of service to the greatest degree we can. But it's miraculous that we're here at this point, that, we haven't hit one of those catastrophe timelines, that we're calling in the most beautiful, subtle, organic evolution of this system as it raises in frequency as we move to the new octave.
Well, everything that you both just said. It's so interesting, Matthew, that I never put this together in terms of our own moving fully into the healing arts. Because when I sold my business back east to move out to Taos, very similar kind of things were going on. But I think it's important with what you said, Zane, is there can be a tendency, particularly when you have grown up in Western cultures and the education system and the culture itself, to be results oriented. And when you're results oriented, you put that pressure on yourself when you know that you're here for this higher mission, you've established that, and you want to be of service, it's like, okay, what do we do now? We got to, I'm not seeing any results here. I got goals. I'm not seeing any results. And that can be a deterrent to what actually needs to happen. So the stepping back when, as you described, you feel sort of the crashing of another timeline come in when you were feeling so high a minute ago, it's that self-awareness, that constant self-awareness. And for me, because I've always been a big picture kind of person, it's like going to the big picture. Okay, what is important? If you can't figure out in your own life what's most important in terms of a moment in time or a chunk of time, it's like, all right, well, what's most important in terms of what I'm here to do, make my contribution in the bigger picture? That to me starts to bring in some clarity and focus where you might have gotten off course for a little bit. And then self-care. I mean, that's the thing. When you're results oriented and you're so committed in your purpose here and everything else, and you got you're all armored up with like, let's do this. It doesn't happen in a straight line. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be really careful with the whole self-awareness thing as to when to step back, take time off. That even goes for so many people are talking about, waking up in the morning and it's like, oh my God, what I was doing on the astral plane, you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, so true.
And to me, and I've advised clients in this as well, you've actually got to take yourself off duty. You've got to say, okay, I need to be off duty. And you have to know how to do that. And that's where that whole self-care thing comes in. There are many, many of us on the planet right now that are working towards this. We all don't have to be full on in every single moment because we'll burn out. So I think that's an important piece to what's going on as far as the awareness of how do we continue to move this forward, but it also has sort of it has a divine timing to it. And there's trust. There has to be a trust and a faith that it's actually we're doing it. We are actually doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important point as people, if you're finding yourself in a similar situation here where you're being called into another direction or you're feeling this a compulsion to recalibrate your life. I think a really, really important component of that is exactly what you said of the rest. Like you have to have, maybe it ultimately relates into our self-worth as well, why people, feel those challenges, and it's easy to identify with that kind of programming of the do it, action now, results oriented, and if we achieve this place within our being of recognizing our own inherent worth and then giving yourself permission to do what is necessary, which is to allow things to to integrate, allow your being to recover. It's very important that the nurturing aspect go hand in hand with the action aspect, that you're being inspired to change these directions. And, I know the timing now, way more intense than it was in 2011 when I made that change myself. And yet what I was doing in that period of time that I look back on now, and even in this thinking in this conversation, is that, for me, my rest and recovery for years has been fly fishing and, living in the desert, and there's no ocean around us other than an ocean of sagebrush. But, my ability to ground in would be to go fly fishing. And I was able to give myself permission to do that. Like when I was being called, when I felt that call of like, I need to go ground, I need to go get into the flow of the river and allow that energy to move. I mean, that was a hugely important piece of the puzzle for me to be able to muster the energy and to like coalesce that vision into an action place. And so, I would recommend that as people listening to this that are being, feeling, like a related kind of inspiration rising within themselves right now, that it's highly important that we do everything that we can to nurture ourselves. And then also being aware of any potential patterns like I would have carried in the past about indulging too much into that, because then you can engage avoidance. But, but that it's really I think that's really an important piece for everybody to know. And we're under such, we can't even conceive of the degree of which our energy bodies are being affected right now by this whole process. And so, giving ourselves permission to rest and recover as you're actioning your inspiration, I think is very important.
Uh-oh, Matthew, you did it.
What?
You brought up recreation and nature. Oh, that's a long one. You're going to be here all day. For Justine and I, obviously going outside and connecting with the planet, with the earth, which is not under the stronghold of the matrix. The matrix is an overlay, but it's really being projected through human beings onto the rest of the organic system. And so if you can go out and, bare feet or, walk on the earth, go swimming, here we can get up into the mountains. Oh my God. It's amazing how big the reset can be. And so because we're under a barrage of so many different energies, I think it's more important than ever to find that point of connection with the planetary consciousness, who is evolving. We're evolving in tandem, and she's throwing off layers of distortion and suppression and all of these different, there's so many inversions operating on the planet right now, from the mega dams to, power points to mega churches to who knows what operating on these grid points, military bases, et cetera, et cetera.
Train derailments on ley lines.
Right, exactly. And yet, at the same time, if we go to these pockets that are relatively intact, if we're lucky to have an intact ecosystem around us, we can be reminded of the frequency we are moving towards as human beings. It really reflects to us, one key thing it reflects to us is a lack of presence, and really getting caught up in our story. And those mental overlays, that is the way that the matrix operates in this system. The mind, the foreign installation, and the Don Juan material, we run programs that aren't coming through our channel. They're coming from a synthetic supercomputer, if you want to think of it like that. And we get, I see myself, I'll speak for myself personally, right? Get caught up in this sort of urgency like you're talking about, and it's very goal oriented. And it's like, well, I've got to get this thing rolling, and we've got to, with the podcast, for example, I see the patterns start to come up of, well, we've got to get, all the accounts registered and have everything active, and we've got to be reaching out to new people and all of these things, and it creates this sort of frantic internal state that is not just grounding energy and running our own cosmic channel down to our ground point, which is Earth, and allowing that energy to translate into Gaia. Like that's, I think, the big work that we're here to do. And so trying to find that balance between, okay, I have things that I maybe want to see manifest in my own life, but if I went and, hermited by the river up in the mountains the rest of my life, I would be doing the work majorly, maybe even more so, right? And so the rest and relaxation is, I would say it's absolutely critical.
Well, and the interesting thing about that, even as you're both talking, is and this is something that I want to do more of, is bring people onto the land and realize that if you're being called to a certain place, and it doesn't have to be what human beings qualify as a sacred site, because as far as I'm concerned, everything is a sacred site, you're actually feeding the earth energy as well. And so what may feel like rest and relaxation, and I need to be grounded, and there's this conception of, I get so much from just lying on the earth. What I've always felt is the land itself, and this comes from I guess I've been doing it all my life, more so as a kid, not all those years where I own my own business, but certainly being out here in the Southwest, that when I'm on the land speaks to me, no matter where I am. And the land, if I can really tune in and become aware, it's thanking me for being there to offer to it, which is part of creation. And there's that whole reciprocal thing that's always going on. Many indigenous people can speak profoundly to this. We just had a whole contingent of Peruvians here from the Sacred Valley in Peru, and they spoke eloquently about everything they do is in relationship to creation. And that in and itself creates a more holistic, as far as I'm concerned, the original intent of what it is to be in a physical incarnation on this planet. And everyone has a piece of that. That's the beautiful thing about bringing people onto the land, because everyone has a piece to add to that. And it's incredibly unique to add their own energy to this creation. In that way, as you were talking about, Matthew, the things that people are talking about being called to a different way of service. I like to call it their contribution, which is directly related to what you're passionate about. That will come if you allow a different kind of perspective on what that is. It's an entirely more holistic thing than just, getting your business cards, and setting up a website, and having a podcast, and having a client list. If you can be more organic about allowing, as you said, Matthew, allowing that to come to you in this moment of time that feels like there's a transition going in your life for the next thing, the next up-leveling that may be going on, and if you can allow it to come in, it's beautiful in terms of how that happens. And being on the land, places that call you, that you feel particularly connected to, can be incredibly helpful in that creation process at that time.
Yeah, I think to build upon that as well, and maybe to offer reassurance to people that find themselves, going through this experience, and yet they live in Houston, Texas, or like us, living in the New York area. I lived in Brooklyn when I was in my early 20s, and that desire to connect into the natural world. And as you say, coming into the land here where we live, we're very blessed, because of the access to land and, the energy that is here in this vortex of Taos. And yet living in Brooklyn, I worked in the Empire State Building for about a year and a half, and which is in the heart of Midtown in Manhattan, and, thousands and thousands of people constantly around, and what I would do is I would try to go regularly after work. I would take the subway up to Central Park, right? And I discovered my brother-in-law had told me about the Ramble in Central Park, which is like the most natural part of the actual environment, where like the exposed granite bedrock is right there, glacially sculpted, and I would go in there, and even though I'm in the middle of this city of millions, tens of millions of people in the field, by going in there and like wandering around and looking at the trees and smelling the air and seeing actual like topsoil in the earth, and that it's not a concrete jungle. And then, I found this one crack in the granite inside the ramble where there was a long crack, and in that crack was a tree that had grown, and it had one root going one way and one root going the other way, filling the crack. And I remember I would go there and tune into that and just give that tree so much respect that tree had like made it work in a crack of bedrock, and there it was, a 30 or 40-year-old tree. And so we can access these frequencies, you can access the natural environment even by putting your attention on the sycamore tree that was growing in the little patch of dirt right outside of my apartment in Brooklyn. And so, for giving hope to people that perhaps are living in these situations, that, you don't have to escape into like wilderness in order to tune in, but it's the alignment with the energy and the intentionality of connecting in with the field of the natural world, because that natural world is all around us, even if it's covered up in a bunch of concrete with concrete and glass and steel buildings all around us. It is still available, and everybody has the ability to look up and see a cloud, and so we have access into these fields, and this is maybe part of our multidimensionality, coming online, is that we can bring those energies through regardless of where you find yourself daily.
Yeah, I think that is a very good reminder. And yeah, I mean, it's, I've had experiences, I feel lucky to have had experiences in my life with maybe certain medicines being in a slightly altered state. But what you realize is that the altered state is our normal state. Yeah. What we would call, the programmed state or the matrix state. That's an altered state. The normal, like the true normal state, the true center state, is to see the brilliance and the creativity all around you. And so I remember, maybe late high school, early college years, having these experiences outside in the desert or in Maine in the moss forests, where I would suddenly see something. I would see the exquisite detail and intelligence and the life force moving through these environments. And it totally transformed how I looked at the external world. I was, you're walking through this sacred realm of the most intricate, magical creativity you could ever conceive of. And there's so many weird little whimsical nuances to how it's all been brought together. And even, I think it was last night, my cat was meowing, and I was just like, what a crazy creation to make this like little fuzz covered animal with so much like personality and so many weird little nuances. And, I think that's why we love our pets, is because they're outside of the matrix field too. And so we see it's so entertaining for us to watch the way in which they express and translate energy, and the same goes, maybe not quite as relatable, but with like our houseplants, and they're pouring out this beauty and this intricate design, and it connects us back to this field of creation, and the earth is a storehouse of that creation, and so many magical codes and frequencies are contained there. And the only issue is that we're blind to them. We don't see them because we're wrapped up in mental programs, and I've had a lot of experiences going to places that for me are absolutely sacred, and I have a reverence that's as powerful as anything in my life experience, and someone there with me never sees it. Yeah. And it's, when we talk about the experience, maybe enough to like take some photos or something, but to see it is different, to really see it. And I think, just to try to then correlate this back to how we opened the conversation, we're doing the same thing with our inner process. We're trying to look at what has been programmed into us as a limiting pathway that feeds energy into the matrix and into the inversion system. And we're trying to differentiate between that and what are our true organic crystalline pathways that connect to source, that connect to all that is, and where the true magic flows and the creation actually happens and translates. And so we can go out into the natural world and see that brilliance reflected in the same way that we can tune in a meditation and see, okay, that's a creation channel, like that's beautiful energy, and I want more of that everywhere in the world around me. And meanwhile, this is programming, this is programming, this is programming, erase, clear, cut the cords, boom, let it go, right? And the more of us that do that, talk about doing the work. I don't care what your external life looks like at all, right? You can have any job, you can be anywhere on the planet, you can live in Vegas. That's all good. But if you're running that process internally throughout your day for even just a minute of your day, it's massive, right? Because we're purging the inverted frequencies and we're allowing the creation codes to anchor again. And that's cool.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that we have to relearn that? Because two things made me think of. I have a dear friend at Taos Pueblo. There was another friend who came in and was talking about a trip that he had just gone on. And the three of us were sharing, and this other friend was saying, and there was all this synchronicity and magic. And the friend from Taos Pueblo just sort of nodded with that wise, knowing way and said, that's actually the way it's supposed to be. That's the way we have lived for, thousands of years. So there's that. It's perspective. It's perspective. And then there's also, if anyone can go back to those precious moments when you were a child that you were either alone or you had those moments of wonderment. You had those moments of, I still can remember waking up on a Saturday morning when I didn't have to go to school and sitting bolt upright in bed going, as soon as I get my chores done, because there were always chores, I can do whatever I want. And I would make a beeline for, going outside, because we were allowed to go outside into nature and run around in the woods. But if you can remember those feelings, and maybe you can access those moments of wonderment from your own childhood, when none of these overlays were part of your existence. You were just pure experience. You were just interacting with the world, whatever that was for you, in just a very pure way. That is exactly what you were just talking about, Zane. It's like being in that, crystalline, pure, so is it work? Because I have a really hard time and have had a hard time with that word for a long time. Can it not be, and work, the only meaning to work is effort towards something, but it has the distortion a lot of times in our culture, like, I got to work towards something. I got to work towards something. I'd rather, play towards something. I'd rather remove all of the restrictions and just put myself in that place of pure awareness and have the experience of. And then you can sort of get back to that place, it seems to me, where you can, even if it's for a fleeting moment, of that crystalline channel that you talk about. And then you build on that. And there's no sort of guidebook, because I feel like everyone can make suggestions, but you have your own unique way of coming at it. And that's why I think having conversations of this sort are really important for people to have also, because some of it is we're sort of groping around in the dark as we're moving towards, creating this new world, new earth, whatever you want to call it. And it's really important to get the feedback and reflection from other like-minded beings and talk about it. It's not like anybody's got this all figured out. It's called creation, folks. We're supposed to be creator beings.
Yeah, we talk it into creation, right? There's also, I relate to the frustration of there being only talk. Like that can get really old too, and especially if the talk is not at a frequency that's really necessarily lighting me up, I'll kind of lose interest. But I noticed in a previous kind of phase of this process that we're all going through, and we're all at different points. But when I was awake, let's say this was 5 years ago or something, and I knew a lot of these things kind of intellectually, but I would watch myself phase in and out of that reality. And so I would turn on all of these podcasts and shows and do a guided meditation or something to try to pull that frequency band back into focus. And then I would be working or something and watch it kind of slip away, and then I'd be like, no, come on, and pull it back into my reality. I was just reflecting this morning on how that has now stopped. Every day I'm fully conscious of what we're in the middle of now. And so in my own personal journey, that means I am more in service of this new timeline, and I don't have to look out at the world and complain that such and such hasn't happened yet, because I can be assured that in my own internal state, it is happening without any doubt, without any question. And that's the only thing I can fully take responsibility for, is the energy I'm anchoring and then projecting into manifestation. And I remember when you were talking, Ginger, just the other day, pulling my boat off the river and walking up, this little message came in super clearly. It's not about what you do. It's about the frequency at which you do it, and that's it. All the masters, right, have been teaching forever. And so I kind of hogged the mic there. I'm sorry, Matthew.
No, not at all. No, I think that's perfect, because as you're describing that oscillation, when you initially were speaking about the oscillation a few minutes ago, and I was seeing this overlay of the model of the nature of reality that we've been given, going down to the very smallest manifestation of our material reality, which would be an atom, right? Apart from subatomic stuff, whatever. But in this model that we're given of an atom, and we've got these electrons that are again, I don't know if this model is fully accurate, but it's a great metaphor. That the electrons, as they're moving at the speed of light around, or maybe even faster, around the atom, there's this inherent oscillation where observation has been made that these electrons are phasing in and out of this reality, right? And so when you look at that, at the very core foundational building block of the nature of our reality as we've understood it, that 50% of the time it's actually out of phase into this other realm. The electron is out of phase, which means the field of the atom is out of phase half of the time. As above, so below, right? And so that we see ourselves, if we look at our own energy field and understand that through that translation of reality, 50% of the time, our experience, our consciousness, our energy body is out of phase with this material reality. And so I was just kind of seeing that then as this explanation of maybe why we're oscillating with these things, going into the I'm so lit up, I'm inspired, I understand what's going on, to, as you were saying, oh geez, I gotta wake up and do my dishes now, and so I think that building upon that then with what you were just saying, Ginger, that and Zane, that the intentionality that we bring into this experience of where we are aligning our energy consciously, and if that model holds true to a degree that only 50% of our time that actually is in existence is the cohesion, perception of our life, then what we do is if you can bring intentionality into what you're aligning with as much as possible, then you're making a frequency alignment that then begins to kind of, make the consensus reality that you are intending, the alignment with the creator. And it's like, for every day that you do that, every day that you're consciously making an alignment with this new creation, it's almost as if it begins maybe washing away some of the unconsciousness that where the matrix has entrained our reality creation, right? And what's on the other side of that other 50% that we have no conscious awareness of most of the time. That's the great mystery, maybe. But my understanding would be that it's pure consciousness within that quantum field, or pure consciousness in this other dimensionality. And maybe we're bridging that gap, by bringing in that intentional alignment. And so it doesn't matter if you wake up and you feel frustrated about, the density that we're dragging through, but even in that moment, then that you can just make that small shift, as you said, like I'm sitting here staring at this big, beautiful geranium plant. And even in that, like recalibrating and going, gosh, look at the beauty of that green frequency coming through the light in the geranium leaf. That itself is the recalibration, and will help, I think, entrain our perception, our energy body, however we want to talk about it, into the conscious creation and away from the distorted reality matrix, the false light matrix.
Wow, I got shivers on that one. Cool. Well, I think that we should probably call that a wrap for this go around. Now that I'm all fired up, Perfect.
That's going to last you for the rest of the day.
I don't know. It might make it till like 3:30. The way
then
things
we
are
just
going.
go to the river then. Yeah.
I'm planning on it. You all are welcome.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Awesome.
Excellent.
I love you guys. Woo.